Welcome to the Wise View. Use our IQ to give you our point of view. Some things we thought you knew, other things you believed in and found out it wasn't true. So me and my crew make it do what it do. We came to chop up game with y'all for a few. So take heed and get a clue and check us out. The Wise View. The Wise View. The Wise View. The Wise View.
Anytime the black man attempts to change the slave image, he will scare white people.
It is going to come. The question is, will it take the form of the righteous indignation tied to love and justice, or will it take the form of raw rage tied to revenge and bigotry?
White man should control the politics of his own community and control the politicians who are in his own community.
God is going to punish you if you don't stand up for what is right.
Good evening and welcome to a special episode of The Wise View. I'm your host, as always, Sabir Alim. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. A term coined by Benjamin Franklin that spoke to encouraging a good work ethic. Franklin was born January 1706 and died April 1790 and was known as one of the founding fathers of the United States. A prominent man, Franklin had many aspirations: politician, civic activist, author, scientist, statesman, printer, Freemason, and inventor, to name a few. He eventually earned the title of the First American due to his untiring campaign for colonial unity. Be reminded that Franklin, like most whites during that era, was also an owner and trader of black slaves. By the 1750s, Franklin became one of the most renowned abolitionists by presenting an argument against slavery from an economic perspective. In June 1776, he was appointed to the Committee of Five, which was the committee responsible for the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration asserted certain legal and natural rights of citizens, to include revolution, that obviously were not recognized by then King George III, ultimately serving as a justification for the independence of the United States from Britain. On the day of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Franklin, supposedly replying to a comment made by John Hancock about the need for them all to hang together, was quoted as saying, "Yes, we must indeed all hang together, but most assuredly we shall all hang separately." I'd be remiss if I did not mention that one of the 56 signers of the document recanted his support of the revolution. 8 of the signers were Britain-born, and there was a 44-year age difference amongst the members, with the oldest being 70 years old, Franklin himself, and the youngest was 26 years old. Now, I don't know how many of them hung together, be it Negroes or for them going against the grain, nor can I tell you how many of them remain within the crevices of America. But I can tell you that the divide and disdain about the rise and perseverance of blacks in America remains just as significant today as it did even then. Today, however, all must realize for blacks, then ain't now, and today will bring far different results. References to the Declaration of Independence were seldom in the coming years. However, Abraham Lincoln made it the centerpiece of his Gettysburg Address of 1863 and his policies. As a matter of fact, Lincoln made the Declaration to be the foundation of his political philosophy and strongly contended that one statement, in particular from the Declaration, which spoke to principles pertinent to the interpretation of the United States Constitution. That statement reads as follows: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Remember, blacks were considered property and 3/5 of a man, therefore not citizens. I thought it significant to begin at a point in America's history, in a place where I was born and raised, Philadelphia. I, like many others, also need to relate from a perspective that I experienced as a black man in America, and not from a place and or time that only reminds me of a sordid past, someone to keep alive, both blacks and whites. Not that America's history with blacks in America will be, or should be, ever forgotten. It has been the driving force of hatred on both sides of the fence. Blacks should never be expected to forget slavery. Blacks have been, however, asked to stop the frequent rant of blaming all whites for slavery and associating them all with bigotry in America. Blacks should also be reminded that slavery then and now was also in part a self-inflicted condition. The transatlantic slave trade was just that, a trade. In the 21st century, there are still numerous movies, television series, and documentaries made regarding blacks as slaves, all in the name of what? In 1972, the first movie I saw was Superfly. I was 12 years old, and it was my mother who took me to see that movie. I wanted to be Goldie. These Hollywood depictions of blacks became normalized for blacks in America. Therefore, to see that lifestyle as being part of America's dream wasn't far-fetched at all. And still today, blacks are depicted in film as drug dealers, thugs, thieves, pimps, and hoes. Even black filmmakers have capitalized on the market for such. The excuse that many blacks use when accepting these roles is that they have to feed their families like everyone else, failing to see the long-term ramifications upon other black actors seeking to break that cycle of predetermined roles for blacks in film, but most importantly, upon us all as a people. If blacks can find one role that they would not take because it compromises their values and morals, then it should not be difficult to refuse a role that desecrates your humanity in any capacity. We also find the same with many black recording artists who portray such characteristics through their lyrics and stage performances. For some whites to believe this is to be black culture and aspirational for us all isn't a stretch either. Why is it that we, as blacks, refer to normalized behavior of ours as stereotypical when referenced to by whites? Much like the so-called N-word, it's just another mixed message sent by blacks between themselves and expected to be understood by whites. For 56 years of my life, I have heard the same slave stories, and for just as long, I have heard the same mantra. We want jobs, equality, and justice. To no avail has that happened from those who we continue to beg from. Problem is, we seem to be the only ones begging. Every group in America has received reparations in some capacity, except blacks. Every group that has formed a persistent protest for their rights has been successful. Why are blacks still fighting for something that we obviously will never get unless we go all in? There are templates established by many of our real black leaders, and not these fake, cower-behind, coattail riding sellouts of today who will forsake their own blood relatives and continue to take us all away from the direction of being self-sufficient, self-empowered, and in control of our communities, just to be included. Charles Hamilton Houston was one of the greatest legal strategists who masterminded the dismantling of Jim Crow, actively testing the separate but equal doctrine in the courts. His critical role in the landmark Supreme Court case of Brown versus Board decision was a major victory for the civil rights movement. Carter G. Woodson was the author of a great read, The Miseducation of the Negro, and he was also instrumental in launching Negro History Week, now known as Black History Month. Mary McLeod Bethune, who founded her own school, now part of Bethune-Cookman College. She understood the significance of not separating education from politics. There were also the likes of Garvey, King, and Malcolm X who left footprints in the dirt. Funny how those noted greatly impacted black history. Yet their legacies don't live on, but the residue of slavery is kept alive. The baton has been passed many times, but we seem to keep putting it down and sitting on the sidelines with our hands out, waiting for the winner to make a victory lap and include us without us having put in the work. It seems that our plight of proving not to be inferior is predicated on assimilation, not on a collective effort at forward progress as an oppressed people. Every one of us has a predestined role in making this happen. The real question is, are we willing to collaborate and unify to bring this to fruition? Or must my great-great-grandchildren have to hear the same damn slave stories too? Life is about hard work, and in my eyes, I have seen much individualism and little effort at forming alliances. This is also the same lens that our youth see the world around them through. Nearly every political administration that passes through at each level of government takes more and more away from blacks. Hence the reason the intending candidates always ride on the promise of doing more for us, an easy, gullible platform that harnesses many votes. Where's the fight that our predecessors once touted toward bringing about change for blacks in America? Our anger has been misdirected at one another, all in the name of a self-status. What happened to the village concept, where the elders of the community are conferred with to make rational decisions about the needs of the community, and action is taken? Why have we become so passive when truly our lives and the future of our families are at stake? There are many self-appointed elders who have no relevance beyond the circle of community predators they choose to find themselves amongst. We have long-term black politicians who remain in office, elected not by the true future leaders of the black community, but by those long-time community members who don't do well with change, complacent with going along to get along. We are keeping our youth to be just as ignorant about politics as we are. We watch them slaughtered in the streets and do nothing to protect them, yet condemn them for emulating conduct learned from the very homes they live in. We take away their voice in the home, talk for them, make decisions for them, and then send them out to the world and tell them to be responsible for themselves. There is certainly no credibility with the youth, who are the most important group in any village because they carry on our so-called legacies. The days of keeping hope alive and having a dream are long over. Wake up, people. The revolution is being televised and expressed in all forms of social media. Everything that I have shared with you is leading you towards something, a purpose, a cause, a thing, a thought, and even a belief. And so is such in everything made available to you in all forms of media. Throughout the course of our lives, each of us has been impacted by a series of events which began from the time we were conceived to birth, through to puberty and into adulthood. I remember the days of catching butterflies, bees, and fireflies in a mayonnaise jar, which had holes punched in its top, allowing a means for the insects to breathe, not looking at how I had just taken away their freedom, and in some cases their lives. I never looked at nature as being alive. I looked at it as an environment put in place for mankind's pleasures and conveniences. I have a different, more learned perspective today. Although I may still have an inclination to run through the field with bottle in hand and relive those childhood moments, I merely encourage others to do such. Only this time I suggest observing the behavior of nature in its natural environment. As a people, we too once frolicked through the fields, embracing and relishing that which has been bestowed upon us. And just as I had done with the insects, man has done to us. Shackled like wild beasts, ripped from our families, crammed into inhumane conditions, stripped of our humanity, thrown overboard like chum, dehumanized, distraught, disconnected, and now disenfranchised. Yet, we are still standing. But standing with who? Standing for what? Many of us have taken a seat. Many of us have straddled the fence to the point of indecisiveness and oblivion. no longer wanting for our brother or sister what we want for ourselves, wanting all or nothing. There seems to be no middle ground. So much invested in keeping up with the Joneses and professing to be about helping our people. But helping our people with what? See, we cannot begin to talk about healing the black family until we confront the real black issue: poor relationships. I get it that there are external entities that are working against us. They have and always will. But there are internal issues that plague us. We seem to be more accepting of behaviors from our wives, husbands, boyfriends, and girlfriends, and less accepting, even tolerable of those from our biological family members. Many of us have internalized such hatred toward our family members that family reunions have either ceased or been reduced to random visits of one another's homes. We take no responsibility for our own negative behaviors, thinking that the other person should check themselves. We invest time and energy into telling others about themselves, trying to change who they are, instead of investing time and effort into listening to what is being pointed out about our own conduct and making the changes. After all, it's probably not the first time this behavior has been pointed out, is it? How many times has someone in the past relationship pointed out? Excuse me, sorry. Pointed out the same exact presented behavior that a family member has, yet you cut off the family member. When the crisis comes, who usually shows up? Family, or the so-called friend. As a child, there were many things that I was not in agreement with from my mother, but I was not disrespectful toward her. However, I left home at an early age because I did not agree with her. Even today, at 56 years old, I show her respect. I have rarely even used profanity in her presence. I still do not talk back to her. I do not feel the need to remind her of childhood events in an effort to get back at her because I am now an adult. I am still her child. As a matter of fact, I bounce more things off of her today than I did as a child. Why do we stop the weekly Sunday dinners and weekly holiday gatherings after Grandma passed away? Why do we keep pounding in the heads of our children that they can get out when they turn 18 instead of keeping them close, only to have them return years later? Why do we turn our back on little Boo-Boo because he made a mess of his life by getting on drugs and going to prison? Who began to act uppity because they moved to the east side in a deluxe apartment? Even the Clampets kept family first when they moved to Beverly Hills. Who distanced themselves from other family members because they chose to worship God differently, even going as far as to tell their own children to pray for them because they know no better? Who was elected into a political office and became a politician and not a voice for their own people? And I can go on asking the question, who? But the real question here is who will recognize their neglect of the black family and do something about it? The slogan of Daddy's Right Here Incorporated, my seemingly dormant nonprofit organization, is becoming physically and emotionally available to our family. This is a three-part condition, yet most see it as two. First of all, it does not say being, it says becoming, implying that there is a process. I can be found today by any of my family members who are seeking to locate me. I have had the same telephone number, for over 20 years. I am accessible on many of the social media outlets. I maintain regular contact with family members. I've attended family functions. I do pop-up visits, and I even sometimes babysat. The lifestyle I once lived, coupled with a difficult childhood, certainly left me damaged and incapable of emotional stability. Therefore, much work had to be done in this area. I hated my life. The last 20 years have afforded me so much in the areas of personal development and growth. Many of us do not want to look at the impact that our shortcomings have upon others. We don't even see them as shortcomings, usually blaming others for whatever conflicts we have found ourselves in. Many of us justifiably hold on to resentment toward other family members who have acted out on one of their less endearing traits. So want to forgive them. Funny thing about this is that this dissension is passed on generationally through our children. ultimately separating and or erasing that family member from the core of the family. So many of our own unresolved issues are impeding our ability to be whole, yet we profess to have it all together. When we invest time, energy, and effort into bashing others for being who they are, it says a lot about who we are as individuals. When we do this in the presence of our children, we set the tone for their future relationship building skills. Not just with other family members, but with everyone they come into contact with. We must teach the value of family first. We must understand that no matter what we go through with one another, we will always be family first. It seems that many of us are more receptive to being cursed out, lied to, stolen from, and even beaten on by a mere stranger than our own family member. It seems that so-called friendships have superseded family loyalty. It is no wonder why our children are seeking outsiders to influence, mentor, and even protect them from harm. Our message of family has been distorted, not by the slave master, not by the family court system, nor by the welfare system, but by our own hand. The context of family that I have just been speaking to is our immediate family. But as a people, are we all not members of the same family? Is this not one community? Many foolishly believe that the guns in the black community just happen to get there by some mythical character in the hood who has that kind of connect, not wanting to believe that this is all compliments of federal assistance. This is the same assistance black communities received in 1980 with the tsunami-like influx of powder cocaine into South Central LA. I took some time to kind of, in summary, give my perspective on the status of the black family here in America. Much of the same happened when I wrote my book, Code Black. When I wrote the book Code Black, I sat down and I was trying to think of a title for the book based on events that I had experienced throughout the years of my life. Well, buy a book that is written by an athlete, an actor, a recording artist, somebody who we perceive, who we've been made to believe is a leader in our community, who is a leader in our community. But we won't listen to each other. I've hosted a number of events right in the community. I didn't have it in Central Philadelphia. I didn't have it at some expensive hotel environment. I didn't have it at some conference hall. I had it right smack dab in the middle of the community. And each time I had that event, I had a very low outcome. People would walk by, people would see the signs. I posted flyers and posters all over in that community. I sent out all kind of information via webcasts, social media, smoke signals, carrier pigeons. I sent it out to everyone who I could possibly think of, who could connect with others. And again, oftentimes, the very individuals who participated in the event were the only ones there. But I never stopped. I never stopped. When I said dormant light in reference to Daddy's right here, I haven't applied for any grants since 2007. But since 2006, I have maintained a course of educating everybody, not just blacks, on the necessity of keeping the black family together. I have done that, and I continue to do that. I have made every effort to collaborate with other organizations, have invited other organizations in to participate. Yet those very organizations who I invited in fail to do the same. When we look around at the conditions that exist in the black community, we really have to ask ourselves, what contribution are we making to the demise of our very own communities? Because we are making a contribution. Many sit back and keep putting the same damn politicians in office who do nothing. Many sit back and complain, and while they're sitting on their hands complaining, the rest of the community is falling apart. But complaining seems to be something that we have come to be known to do best. We march when there's an event that impacts the entire community, such as the slaughtering of our young black males in the streets, be it by a racist white officer or be it by a little homie down the street. We're outraged, but we're not outraged obviously enough to be more persistent, more consistent, and more vigilant in bringing these things to an end, because we can bring them to an end. These incidents are not new. They're incidents that have taken place throughout the years, throughout the history for blacks in America. But we still have come away from these events, these incidents, with the same outcome. A march, a protest that later dies down, and we go back to the so-called normal living. That's not normal living. When you stand by at a party, at a barbecue, hell, sitting in a barber chair, and see an individual face to face walk in, brandishing a gun, and kill someone right before your very eyes. You didn't catch that on video. You didn't catch a damn license plate. You didn't catch the back of their head. You didn't catch anything. Anything. But then you dial 911 and you cuss out and abuse police officers who come up on the scene trying to find out what's going on, trying to find out who did what, and you give them nothing. You give them nothing but your ass to kiss. It's pathetic. When you look at the jobs that police officers have in our communities, we have police officers walking the beat in many communities now, making every effort at trying to rebuild, and in some cases build relationships between themselves as a community. Do you know what police officers make? Do you know how much their income is? Do you know what they have to deal with every single day? Why are we not working alongside law enforcement? It's sad. It's a sad day in America, period, to see officers, law enforcement officers, those who are paid to protect and serve the community, randomly killed. It's sad. Are you protecting your own community? No. You're not getting these cowards off the street, but you want somebody else to do it, but you want to give no help and bring a resolve to the situation. No. I can go on to any social media platform and find all kind of photos and videos of ratchetness going on. I can find all kind of videos and other remarks regarding law enforcement. But no change has come. No change has come. Even our own President of the United States, President Barack Obama, was heavily and continues to be heavily scrutinized by the black community, instead of us applauding his efforts as the President of the United States for all people, not just people of color. And that's where we keep getting it twisted. We want brother to do for brother because they are brother, as opposed to looking at their true role. I often tell staff that I am not the Muslim program director. I am the program director who happens to be Muslim. My choice. I'm not the director for the Muslims. I'm not the go-to person when there are issues regarding Islam. I represent all people, because that is what a Muslim should do. I don't have the right to judge anybody and distance myself from them and ostracize themselves for any reason. Not saying that I don't, not saying that I won't. I'm flawed, just like the next person. But when you're seeking to live responsibly, you do so by addressing the things that are wrong. We have a lot of things that are wrong here for blacks in America. But the change has to begin with us as a people. To get up on a Saturday morning to go outside and to sweep your pavement shouldn't be a difficult task. Not at all. But for some it is. For some we continue to find ourselves faced with conflict and confrontation just when we ask somebody to move their car. It should be nothing for you not to, even outside of a Saturday morning, come out and sweep your pavement, pull up the weeds. Matter of fact, you have an elderly neighbor, or a single person, a single woman specifically, who can use the assistance to have her front yard cleaned up, her backyard cleaned up. But no, we're too busy trying to get in the door so we can get between her legs, because that's most important. And then you, even after doing that, still not coming through and helping her maintain the roof, utility bills, the lawn, the yard, none of those things. None of those things. I'm tired of hearing over and over again this whole concept of slavery, and keep hearing it every single day. I get it. I got it. I know it. I can regurgitate it over and over again. I get sick and tired of hearing the excuses for poor behavior from our men. Men who sit around just complain all the time. Don't volunteer anywhere. You don't volunteer domestic. You don't volunteer to church. You don't volunteer at the synagogue. You don't go to the hospital and participate in anything, but you always have something to say about everything. And I'm tired of hearing it. I'm 56 years old. I've been involved in many things, from entertainment to drug dealing, other sides of criminality, and I've stayed the course. And those things that I once saw joy in are no longer things that I see joy in today. All I see joy in today is doing what's right to the best of my ability. Keeping people around me who are positive. Keeping people away from me who are not. I'm by no means an arrogant person, an angry person, a person who thinks he knows it all. I'm a person who is seeking to bring about change. About change. I'm speaking specifically today about the status of blacks in America. But I'm talking about representing change for all people. Because if you have one group of people who is disenfranchised or oppressed, there needs to be change. And all of us need to put our hands in there. Many have and continue to lend a hand to move blacks in the direction that they have struggled to, that we have struggled to move towards for a long time. But yet still these are the very people who many criticize and condemn because of skin color. Yet we cry racism. We cry racism towards whites. Look at our own rhetoric. Look at our own perspectives on things. And ask yourself, how is that language very much similar to those who we are pointing fingers at? Oh, I'm not your damn Uncle Tom. I'm not confused at all. I didn't make it to be 56 years old by being stupid. Nor have I made it to where I am in life by being stupid. But I'm not one who is going to stand by and allow somebody to constantly preach to me over and over again Hate the white man, hate the white man, hate the white man. I don't want to hear that. Hate is a choice as well as love. The God I serve teaches me to love. Don't teach me to be a fool. I'm not taught to be passive. I'm not taught to stand by and let you do any damn thing you want to do to me, nor say anything you want to say to me. We need to take a look at who we've become. Not why. Just look at who we've become. And ask yourself, what contribution are you really making to society? Many have just settled for having an ES350 sitting out in front of the house, a 92-inch television screen, 25 pair of diesel jeans, 10 pair of Jordans, and we feel like we've arrived. We feel like we've accomplished. But there was a contribution to that as well. Compliments of federal assistance. Oh no, I'm not talking in code. You can call it anything you like. You can name the agency if you choose to. But at the end of the day, there is still a handful, a drizzle, a droplet of people who live today who still seek to divide America, Americans specifically. When you take a realistic look at America, you have to understand that this is corporations, world relationships. This is the formal aspect of politics. When you look at the informal aspects of politics, right, there's little being done. And the informal aspects of politics regards the human being. We as a people are supposed to take responsibility for ourselves. We as a people are supposed to take responsibilities for our families. We as a people are supposed to take responsibility for our communities, policing our own communities. And I don't just mean policing in the sense of cleaning up the dirt that's on the ground, but cleaning up the dirt that exists on the block. Be them on the corner, be them in a residence in our community, be it in political office. That's our responsibility to clean that up. We have to now begin the process of cleaning up. I'm not looking towards somebody to make things happen for me in life. I'm not looking towards somebody else to start bringing about change in my community. I will work tirelessly to better my community. When I referenced the term by Benjamin Franklin about early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, we have to understand the significance of that in terms of work ethic, right? No, sometimes you don't get any sleep. That's a reality. So let's not be literal in the defining of that term, of that statement. But let's look at it from this perspective. Getting up off your behind and doing something on a regular basis is a contribution. And when I say something that is contributing to the progress of our communities, of our families, of other individuals. The wealth is another great part of our confusion, because we associate income, high or low, with wealth. And that's not wealth. That's not wealth. And I'll let you look more into that for yourself and ask yourself, why do you continue to equate income with wealth? I didn't grow up in the household where anybody taught me about money management. In elementary school, we had PSFS that used to come in and teach us about banking. Somewhere along the line, I don't know what happened with my bank account. Not pointing fingers, not blaming anyone. But why wasn't it pressed upon me throughout all of my childhood, the significance of banking? Why was money not banked for me? Not banked for me. I was reading a story the other day, and it was online. It was a Yahoo story, and it was talking about a father. It was a letter a father had written, actually, to his son. The son had a wife who was a stay-at-home mom. The father, on a monthly basis, wrote out a check for X amount of dollars, right? The wife was given the money by the husband. The wife was taking that money and giving it to the church as her tithe. The father sat back and looked at that, and he said, well, I give you this money every month because you have a wife who stays at home and raises her child. That money is for you guys to live on. He said, I'm not giving you that money anymore. If I'm giving you the money and you're giving it to your wife, and she takes all of this money every week and gives it to the church, then that's not my intent for the money. Therefore, the father decided he was going to take that money and he was going to put it into IRAs and different things like that, so the children, when they grew up, could have money for education, right? And for other things, insurances, other things that they may need to have. Just think for a minute where our children, where we would be today. Before we even get to our children, just think where we would be today if our parents or whoever our caretaker was did the same for us. What position would we be in right now, economically? Begin to do that for your children, your grandchildren. There was also a time when there were at least 3 generations living in the same household. Today, children getting put out, you're 18, get out of my house. I want to live my life now. Yet the very home that you put money into in your passing will be passed along as well. The black family is heavily splintered because we have pushed family members out of the door. We don't take care of our parents. We don't allow our parents to guide us, the elder of the family, because we're in disagreement. We're going to always be in disagreement. But when you allow the hierarchy to exist within the family, there's a phenomenal response that happens within the family that gets passed on to the community. Go down the road of houses that you live in, and one of the things that you'll find is that most of those households are lived in not by the person who obtained the house through it being passed on by a family member, but the house is actually a rented home. They're renting the house, or they've obtained a mortgage because the house has been moved on. When what you should be doing is entering into the home and seeing generations within that environment. Parents need to stop telling the children to get out. Children need to start being more respectful of the parents. But the parents have to begin to listen to the children. The parents have to begin to nurture that which is within the child so they can grow into some level of independence. Many children have been kept in a position of being dependent. Therefore, they don't know how to move on with their lives. They don't know how to take care of themselves. It's a terrible thing to see a young man who lives with his mother getting up out of the bed and just leaving his clothes behind, stepping out of his drawers and leaving them on the floor, throwing his pants across the chair, hanging his jacket on the closet door, which brings to mind the Karate Kid, you know, where every time the little boy came into the house, the coat rack was right there, but he just throw his jacket on the floor. But Mr. Miyagi made him pick the jacket up, and he made that part of his conditioning. Part of his conditioning, because that's about respect as well. Respecting self first and foremost. Having some self-discipline. But most importantly, respecting one's parent. You don't have to be in agreement with your parent. I don't agree with everything my mother says, but I don't have to be disagreeable with her. I don't even have to disagree with her. My mother's been around a lot longer than I. And the longer I stay around, the more I learn, the more I seek to learn, which allows me to pass on some wisdom to somebody else. We spend an insurmountable amount of time being at odds with one another because we don't agree. Why do we have to agree on every point? Why can't we just realize that everybody has a role in the community? Everybody's role is significant. There are no big I's and little U's. It's about all of us in the end. Because at the end of the day, when the hammer comes down, we all gonna suffer. All of us. Nobody walks away from this life unscathed. If you're living life afraid to die, then that's part of the problem. You're not in alignment. You're not seeking to be in alignment with God. Whatever it is that you choose to call it, just call it. I don't fear death. And I often say that, and my wife, she, gets concerned sometimes when I make that statement. But I can't live that kind of life. Not in the same breath professing to fear none but God. For some reason, He's kept me around for 56 years. I don't know why, but I continue to strive to be a good servant. Nowhere near perfect. Not striving to be perfect, because perfect doesn't exist for the human being. It's important, people. It's really important. Our lives depend on it. We have to start looking through a different lens. I have heard the same pleas all of my life. It's like I see the same signs, the same posters over and over again. We need jobs. We want justice. We want equality. I want to focus on being a good American, because that's what I am, an American. Period. And being a good American means utilizing every resource that's available to every other American to bring about change in the black community. I referenced in my speech former black leaders. And even though our leaders go on to the next life, doesn't mean that what they leave behind should die. We seem to keep starting over. We seem to forget the messages left. And as such is the case with prophets that God has sent to mankind. One's gone, mankind goes back to what they've always done. Next one comes along, people jump on the bandwagon just because. Leadership begins in your home. Leadership begins with you as an individual. I am the imam of my home. I am the pastor of my home. I am the elected official in my home. I am a public servant. I don't need to be voted into any office. I don't need to cast any ballot. When I made a decision to enter into marriage, I took on those responsibilities automatically. As a father, I took on those responsibilities automatically. No court can dictate or define that for me. None. Dream no more. Open your eyes. See the world as it really is. And do something. Because the time is now, folks. The time is now. Everything you see in the media, even that which what I'm saying to you, intends to lead you in the direction of thinking and doing. Stop letting the media tell you who your enemy is. You can see for yourself. You can see for yourself. Many know that I'm Muslim because of my name, which again can also be an assumption. It can also be an assumption because of my name. But what is seen in my conduct? What is seen in my character? What is witnessed by all in terms of what I do? We have to begin to take roles as leaders individually, and always remember that great leaders are great followers. And some of us have a problem with following. But when you ask somebody to follow you, make sure you're prepared to lead them in the right direction. We have long-term politicians in offices who do nothing. They don't mentor anyone else. All these youth who need to be mentored, because the youth, they're our future. Why do you continue to pass on information to the same old jokers who've been in the same position that you've been in for years? You get into a new office, they're still part of your administration, and they still have the same thinking. You don't bring in new thinking. The city of Philadelphia voted twice, and I guarantee you that people didn't pay attention. First time it was voted for the retirement age of Supreme Court appointees to 70 years old. Very next presidential election, it was asked recently to move that age to 75 years old. Now, I know that there's a strategy involved in all of that. But have you explained the strategy? And how do you solidify such as being a contributor to controlling a democratic position? And how do you convince someone that the Democrats represent the needs of the black community? Because when you look back and you look forward, what has changed under the Democrats? And everybody wants to say, well, you have Republicans in office now, so let's see what you're going to have to say years down the line. Well, it's not new. It's not new. We've had Republican presidents. Things didn't get worse. Things haven't gotten better under any administration, Republican or Democrat. Because once again, we continue to look towards government to bring about change. We're ill prepared for anything that comes down the pipe because we're not unified. We're not taking the time to organize like we should. Oh, but our youth, they're on point. Don't sell them short. They're on point. Because they're making use of social media in many capacities. They're making use of those templates that I talked about. They're paying attention to what's going on around the world and learning from it and putting it to use. Oh, the revolution is definitely here. The revolution is definitely taking place. But because you aren't evolving, you can't see that. You can't see that. And that's what has happened in the black community. We have self-appointed elders of the black community. You want to tell me to respect my elders? Well, I consider myself to be an elder. At 56 years old, I do have that right. And I'm not appointing myself upon any people. I'm appointing myself as an elder because that's what I have come to understand and learn about the village concept. That you first have to become as such before you can profess such.